Hello, I'm Carwyn Jones and welcome to this week's Business News Wales Weekly Business Review. Well, once again, we're in the steely grip of coronavirus, and we know, of course, that that's had an enormously negative effect on so many businesses. So we'll be looking today at the kind of support the government has been offering, the announcements this week, and particularly what kind of effect this has had on individual businesses in Wales. I'm joined today by Katy Chamberlain. Katy has been on before, of course, and she is the Chief Executive of Business in Focus. Katy, you're very welcome again.
Thank you. Good morning.
And by Nick Pearce. Now, Nick is the Chief Executive of co-founder of Object Matrix. He's also a co-founder of Global Welsh. Looking at his LinkedIn profile, his responsibilities include owning the global sales strategy and delivering revenue to the business, formulating and executing marketing strategies to ensure our brand is recognized as a leader, seeking out and building strategic relationships, building community links with video professionals through the Workflow Innovation Group. He also pioneers in digital content governance, object storage, and modernizing digital video workflows. Now, I say that, Nick, as if I know what I'm talking about. Give us an explanation of what all that means.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on. Basically, our company is a software company based in Cardiff, and we supply private cloud storage to media companies. So when Mark finishes editing this, ideally he'd have somewhere safe to protect it and share it so that we can approve it. But we provide those platforms for the BBC, France Television, NBC Universal, CNN, etc. So basically protecting content, making sure it's available.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Well explained, and we can understand now what that all means. Could I take you on? There's only one issue we know this week, and that's coronavirus. We've seen some announcements this week. The Chancellor, again, talking to the banks. A lot of criticism of the banks, of course, but the fact that they have guarantees as lenders, but the borrowers don't. They've been looking for security. We hear from businesses, and it's meant that those loans are far less attractive for businesses to take out. We've also seen, of course, a £500 million fund being launched this week by Welsh Government to help businesses. Now, one of the issues we discussed last week was, okay, we have these announcements, but what does it mean for businesses on the ground? How easy is it for those businesses to access the help that they need? Where do they go? We've signposted people to Business Wales, but I'm sure there are other organisations. We heard from the South and Mid Wales Chamber of Commerce last week that are also offering help to various businesses around Wales. Katy, I'm going to turn to you first, if I could, as somebody, of course, with a Business in Focus hat on perhaps today. Yeah. What are you hearing from businesses on the ground in terms of being able to access support?
Well, we're finding, first of all, the fact that there is so much support available is a really good position to be in. There are one or two gaps in support, but, by and large, there is an awful lot out there that businesses can apply for. What we're finding is, as you know, Carwyn, we deliver the Welsh Government's Business Wales service with our partners across Wales. And we are finding that businesses are coming to us, some of them quite distraught, some of them really very concerned, others relatively phlegmatic about their ability to trade through this, but all of them looking to see how they can access the support that's available. And so we're able to signpost them. There's a really good summary on the Business Wales website on the coronavirus hub there. And as you say, other organisations like South Wales Chamber and others are being supported as well. But a lot of the work that our advisors are now doing is working with people to look at their businesses, look at the release that they can find, and look at the, and help them to access them. We also, as you know, have about 500 tenants, and we've done an awful lot of work, both through Business Wales, those that are Business Wales clients, but also just us working directly with our tenants to help them access as much as they possibly can. So I think we've helped about 400 of our tenants so far make the applications for the grant related to the small business rates relief. Particularly that relief, the applications are relatively simple and relatively straightforward. I think there's a bit more complexity around the business interruption loan scheme.
And what sort of complexities are you coming across?
I don't have a really clear story on that at present. I mean, certainly there has been quite a lot of conversation in the media, exactly as you were saying, about how do people, what sort of business proposition is it that they are expected to be providing? You know, something that is basically viable if it were not for COVID-19 is quite a difficult thing to construct, but also I guess it's quite a difficult thing to judge. I mean, the banks are new to judging what exactly this means. So I don't have a sort of clear picture on how that's actually working out yet. I think that'll be interesting to see how that sort of works out over the next couple of weeks. And of course, the Development Bank of Wales loan scheme looks as if it might be, I hesitate to say more straightforward because I'm not in a position to judge, but that has some clarity around the size of loan, the fact that there is a capital and interest repayment holiday, the fact that the interest is 2% interest fixed for 6 years, and the fact that it may be partially secured or not secured. So there is, there are a couple of places to go on this. I think really it's going to be interesting to see how the banks judge the business plans and proposals being put to them.
Is it happening quickly enough, though, as far as the banks are concerned?
I find that one a really tough one to answer, because the answer from a business perspective is, of course it isn't. Can't happen quickly enough for businesses. I mean, the world for businesses literally changed over 2 weeks. And people who had full order books and programs planned out for the next 2 or 3 months have suddenly got a completely blank desk in front of them. So you can't respond quickly enough for that. Nobody can. Again, I think it's going to be the businesses who have some reserves and who can see their way through this will be able to access things in a sensible time frame for themselves. There are going to be some businesses who are perhaps not quite as securely based, perhaps don't have the cash reserves that they need, who may find that no, it simply doesn't come fast enough for them. You know, we're certainly hearing some good stories from our clients, but also a number of clients who are really struggling around this.
That's good. Nick, with your business, obviously you operate in the digital world. There are some who I suspect are saying, well, of course, that wouldn't be as affected as other businesses. But what sort of effect in reality has coronavirus had on your business?
Well, I think like any business, things have been paused everywhere, right? I mean, we support the global media and entertainment industry, and nothing's being shot at the moment because you can't get on set to shoot anything, right? So everything's been pared back. And our industry, like many, like the car industry, for instance, is you've got some big players at the top, like the BBCs and the rest of it, but it's actually supported by tens of thousands of companies our size. And so if the people that have stopped their process, the trickle-down effect is horrific. And I wrote a piece for a publication last week about how the top needs to act responsibly. As we've seen in France, one of our customers has dictated that all suppliers must be paid on time and projects must go ahead. And that's a really responsible thing to do right now. But obviously not everyone can do that. I think I'd quite like to touch on the bank point as well. We've seen loan schemes like this in the past where I think probably under your tenure, the 80% of the loan value was guaranteed by the Welsh government, like a number of years back. So we went to the banks then, and what happens is that you have to give personal guarantees. They come after you for the loan amount, and anything they can't recover, they go after they go to the guarantee for. So that's what people are really worried about right now, is that that's what's happening today. And as a business, John, our CEO, myself, are we comfortable to give personal guarantees when we're actually partial shareholders of a VC-funded business? Is the VC going to put personal guarantees into a loan? I don't think so. So it's not as straightforward as saying, let's have some personal guarantees, because we don't own 100% of the entity. So it's not possible to do that. I think that banks, like everyone today, need to be just throw out the rule book and be a bit more agile and think, right, the whole world is on pause. How can we help?
I think part of the problem has been that the messaging that we've heard is of government guaranteeing loans. Now, of course, what members of the public think is that businesses then are receiving that guarantee. But of course, we know it's the banks who are then seeking
Yeah.
personal guarantees to cover the rest of it. There are many businesses who've said to me, well, I'm not happy to give a personal guarantee in case the business disappears. They don't want to put themselves into that position, an extra risk. And of course, then they're not taking advantage, or feel they shouldn't take advantage of the loan scheme that's in place. What are you hearing, Nick, from other businesses? I mean, obviously, you're prominent in the Welsh business world. What are you hearing, as it were, on a virtual street in terms of the adequacy of the support and the ease of accessing it?
I think actually there's too much noise about support. I think it would be a lot better if there was a single source of truth, because you're getting bombarded with advice from everywhere. And I think it would be useful, the Business News, Business Wales site is a great resource. So I think be really encouraged to keep that. I think there's a huge frustration with the banks and the sort of speed of access to funds. But and especially for startups, obviously, we'll probably get on to talk about that in a bit as well. So I think there's people are worried, definitely. Some companies might feel a bit more secure based on having a bit of reserve, as we've said. Access to funds, and just when's it going to end, right? Because ultimately, and we can talk about this as well, is in my business, people buy from people, and I can do a Zoom call and it's great to see your faces, but unless we sit down, have a meal together, chat personally, then we're never going to build a relationship, right? And people buy from people, and you have to have products to be able to service that relationship. I'm being bombarded with webinars. Come and join my webinar to learn about this product. Come and join this webinar to learn about my service. Nobody's going to do it. It's just too much. It's overload. So I think people are really looking forward to getting back to some sort of normality. But what that new normality is, that's yet to be seen.
You mentioned startups there. One of the issues this week on Business News Wales has been support, or lack thereof, for startups. You mentioned startups yourself there. What have you been finding in terms of what's available for them?
I haven't dug too deep into that. I've only got our own experience. So we've been around 17 years, and we've been through some extreme highs and lots of lows. We had a 3-year trough of disillusionment, which was when we had no money in the business. And I think that as a startup, yes, some government funding would be ideal, and support is necessary. But I think that there are things as founders you also need to do yourselves. If you fully believe in your business model and what you're doing, then somehow you'll find a way. And I know that doesn't sound very friendly, but we had to turn to friends, family. People had to go back out to work whose partners had just had children. It was a really rough time, and we've actually we started out wanting to be the unicorn, but in the end, I think in about 2009, after we'd been through 6 years of hell, decided we were more like a cockroach with unicorn ambitions. And I think everyone wants to be a unicorn, but I bet you everyone wants to be a cockroach right now. Do anything to survive. And I think that's what the mantra should be for startups: do anything to survive. And I've seen people like Dan Lewis from Digital Profile, great business. He's doing everything he can on social, using his personal network to make sure his business survives. And I think that people like Dan will survive, because you have to have that tenacity as a startup company. And I think that startups are not all sort of bean bags and pool table environments. It's the hard end of business. There's very rarely any money. You're craving revenue and you're craving references. And I think that one thing I'd like to see from Welsh government or any government is helping startups get that new business and get those references, because stories build more business.
Yes.
And I think we may have to rip the rule back up on that. I mean, if the shambles of Brexit does anything for us, maybe we can change state aid rules where if a Welsh company buys from a Welsh startup, that Welsh company gets some sort of tax break. So de-risks the purchase and makes it more attractive to help a Welsh startup get the much needed customers they need to then go after the rest of the market. There's a whole lot of stuff can be done, but it's incredibly worrying right now for startups, because if you're going to get a loan based on turnover, what are they going to do? In startup mode, there's hardly any turnover. So I think that my advice is hunker down, use your networks, use your family, reduce down your staff as much as you can, furlough them if you can, just get through this period and use this time to think about how you can pivot, how you can change, and how you can be more effective.
Thanks, Nick. Katy, the £500 million fund that was announced this week by Welsh Government, have you had many inquiries about that fund?
We've had lots of inquiries about that fund, and of course it comes on the back of the grants that are available for small business rate relief, and the grants that are available for businesses in who have a higher rateable value. What the 400 million part of this that's going to go into the Economic Resilience Fund is going to do is it's going to actually plug a bit of a gap around that for the businesses who don't have small business rates relief and therefore wouldn't necessarily be eligible for those grants. So all of these things are really going to be helpful to businesses. Whether they're enough is going to depend a lot on the individual business. I have to say, Nick's summary of what it takes to survive as a startup is an absolutely cracking summary, because people are really going to have to sort of draw upon their reserves, both cash reserves and their inner reserves. The sad thing is some people simply aren't going to be able to do that. People who've only started their business fairly recently, who haven't built up a track record, who haven't built up an order book, who don't necessarily have reserves, that is going to be very difficult for them. There are others who are doing exactly as Nick described, who are hunkering down, who are building their social media presence, who are planning for how they're going to access finance, not just to help them through this period, but what they're going to do coming out the other side. One of the things that, if one is going to shine a ray of light in this, is that we have had, over literally the past couple of weeks, around about 27 people come to us who either are starting their business or who are going to start it as soon as they're in a position to do so. And a lot of that is around online retail. Others are people who are planning for the end of lockdown. In our Carmarthen Enterprise Hub, we've had two businesses who, before this happened, were sort of exhibiting what they did in craft fairs, and now have really accelerated and are now selling online in a way they just weren't a couple of weeks ago. So there are some people who are going to be able to take advantage of this. There are others who are going to have to get the release on offer and grit their teeth and get through it. There are some people who won't be able to do that. And that's really tough.
I mean, when people contact you about the £500 million fund that we mentioned, what do you say to them? Where do you tell them to go? There'll be lots of people who are listening to us today who'll say, well, yes, I've heard about the fund, but how do I access it? What sort of advice are you giving them?
Well, a number of the funds, the UK government funds, which have then been sort of matched by the Welsh Government, are already available. So the local authorities are running the various funds that are related to rent relief, rates relief. And, so all the local authorities have their online portals to be able to access those. I think some of those are more difficult and more simple than others. So we're able to help people, either help them with the application, or if they're pretty good to go, help them find those. In respect of the new fund, that's not ready yet. So that's going to be ready in the next couple of weeks. The sort of final design and the final eligibility for the fund is sort of coming up sort of even as we speak. And hopefully, I think next week, the larger grant for small and medium-sized businesses is going to be available. Qualifying businesses for the smaller fund, the £10,000 grant for micro businesses from 0 to 9 people, that's expected to be ready the middle of April. So at the moment, all we're able to do is help people to plan their way through the next couple of weeks before they can start making those sorts of applications, but also helping people to look at, okay, what are the things that they can they put their staff on furlough? What can they plan for the future? What are the things that they absolutely have to pay? And what deferrals can they take advantage of, like VAT, like tax, and what do they actually have to pay, and how do they apply the funds they've got at their disposal?
I mean, for a lot of businesses, of course, they know about the schemes. Accessing them has always been the biggest question. And obviously, you helped us there in terms of where those businesses should look. You mentioned furloughing staff. I mean, we've seen some stories, of course, this week where smaller businesses have been doing their best to make sure that their staff are kept on and continue to pay them a proportion of their money. Not every large business has been doing that. We've seen some examples in the course of the past week or so where large businesses have said, well, we're not paying our staff and they can find a job elsewhere. But from a small business perspective, are you finding that most small businesses want to be able to furlough their staff and to pay them as much as they can with the support that's available?
I think, different people have different ways in which they work, but we certainly are finding that, most small businesses are fairly tight teams. They want to be able to come out of this fighting the other side. They value and respect the employees they've got, so they're doing their best to take advantage of the reliefs to look after them. I think that there's a really tough call if you're somebody who had left employment recently and are waiting to take up a position in a new company. That's a really tough one because, of course, you're not then eligible for furlough if you weren't on the books at the end of February. And businesses will have different abilities to respond to that and look after those people. But certainly the small businesses that we're finding, talking to, are vast majority of them are looking at how do I preserve what I've got, including my really important team, so that when we come out of lockdown and when we can start taking orders again and when we can access our workplace if we need to do so to produce our products, we're absolutely ready to do so as fast as we possibly can.
Thanks, Katy. I'm going to come on now to the future of work. We talk about this a lot, don't we? What will work look like in the future? And how will it be? Sorry, Nick. You come in. You come in there.
Can I just make a point on the furlough piece?
Yeah.
I think the furlough arrangements, are amazing, and we've furloughed 3 staff. And I do wonder, though, in digital businesses, for our staff to be furloughed and sit at home and twiddle their thumbs is not very good for their mental health. They can do training and volunteering, but there's not much volunteering going on at the moment because you can't go out and do much. But I think it would be really useful if furloughed staff were allowed to do some business-related work to support the teams who are still, doing the daily job. I think the rules are they can't do anything that generates revenue. Well, we can't. No business can afford to have a third or a tenth of their staff sat at home doing nothing, regardless of whether we're certainly topping up our staff. I just think it would be useful, and I don't know what the opinion is of anyone else, that this furlough piece. I think there has to be some common sense about what people can do when they're at home, because the mental health of our employees is as important as them being paid. And if they just sat at home with nothing to do, it's horrific. I don't think it's a good situation. We're really grateful for the furlough. Don't get me wrong, but I think we have to. How long this goes on for, we have to maybe think about what those people do at home.
No, you're right. My AM office may as well be open physically because my staff have been flat out dealing with inquiries online, as you can imagine, and that's that hasn't stopped. So for them, they're still working, but we're all pitching in to try and get things done for people. But I take your point about mental health, and I was going to come on, if I may, to the idea of future of work, and to come back to something you said earlier on. There's been a lot of talk in the last few days about, this is what work will look like in the future. 15 years ago, none of this would have been possible. We were all on SDN. The internet wasn't as developed. We didn't have apps that enabled us to, we had the iPhone, didn't we? We didn't have apps that enabled us to talk to each other. It would be a very different world of work then, and we'd have struggled far more than we do now. People are saying, well, this is it in the future. Why would you have a building somewhere? Why would you rent somewhere when you can sit at home? Of course, there are tax implications for that, but you can sit at home and you can work from home. But you made the point, which I think is an important one. That's the need for human contact. First of all, for their own mental health, people need to see other people and chat to them. And a story I heard a week or so ago about a British company and a Spanish company who were looking to link up in a business venture. The Spanish directors came to the UK, where they spent a day and they were bombarded with presentations. There was a working sandwich lunch, and they had a whole day of being told what the company did, and they were fully informed. And the British company couldn't understand why they didn't get an enthusiastic response. And the Spanish company basically said, well, we know what they do. They're very good, very effective. They'll be good business partners, but we don't know them. We don't know who they are. So there was a return visit to Spain where again there was a lot of discussion about what the Spanish business did, and then they all went out for lunch for about 2.5 hours with wine, and the British company couldn't understand why they were sitting there, having a long lunch. It was dead time, and it was all about getting to know the people first before doing business with them. And again, this comes back to the point: you can't really create that human contact, can you? That sociability, that level of trust with people, unless you're physically with them. No. So the question I'd ask you is: here we are, being able to work remotely now, but will that really take over in the future from, the need to sit down with somebody and get to know them and understand them before you feel confident to do business with them?
I think there are some elements where we will do things like this. When you meet someone in person, you don't spend the first 5 minutes collectively saying, "Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you hear me? Can you see me?" Which happens on every single call I'm having at the moment.
No, not this one, of course, clearly.
No, it's not, because that'll be edited out. It's fine. No, but it's like I said, I've always said you don't build trust over social networks, right? Fake news, the ability, Carolyn, for me to take your video and get you to say what I want you to say these days with the deep fake videos is phenomenal. So actually, when it comes to trust, you have to meet people. It's just the way it is. When buying stuff, you have to know that person is going to be relied on to provide a service, for a B2B type thing for sure. And that means meeting people. Sure. I mean, I've certainly noticed we do a lot of online sales presentations anyway, because we're based in Cardiff and we sell to the world. And before this week, a meeting like this, no one would have their cameras on and we would share a screen. It would be very clinical and dry, and you're talking into a void. This week, we're telling everyone to turn their cameras on and we're all wearing stupid hats and all the rest of it. And it's instantly become more personable. You can see the reaction of people to what you're saying. So I think we will use this tool and this more open approach to showing our faces. And, the fact I've got a pair of dirty tracksuit bottoms on underneath my nice clean shirt, nobody knows that, right? So I think we will use this thing, but it will never replace the need to sit down, chalk and talk, look at each other's eyes and build relationships over lunch, dinner, whatever it is.
Yeah. Katy, from your perspective, the future of work, do you see it becoming entirely digital, more digital, perhaps more remote, I suppose, as we are now? Or do you think there's still a need for people to physically mix with each other?
Oh, I absolutely endorse what Nick says, but I think what will happen is this will give it all a bit of a kick along. And that's not just in terms of service industries, which could actually have a look at their property footprint, could have a think about, do we need to do this on a premises or can we do this remotely? But all businesses. So for example, our own business, we've had Teams on our computers for ages, but we haven't used it properly. We've used it for certain parts of the business, not others. And we've become very accustomed now to running our meetings through Teams. As Nick says, doing it a lot more informally than we would normally have done. So in terms of the efficiency of our business and many people's businesses, I think that's going to get a real kick along. But I don't think it's going to stop the fact that there are going to be needs for teams to come together, for people to come together, so that you actually get that casual, informal interaction that is so much part of building relationships. I think the other thing will be that we will also see, and that's notwithstanding Nick's very valid point about webinar overload, is that people who have previously been a bit reluctant to access services and training through webinars will actually be more inclined to do that now. So we've certainly found in a chunk of the work that we've done, and a lot of the Business Wales work, we've wanted to work through webinars for a long time. It helps us to reach and potentially make networks between people in sort of different parts of Wales. People have been reluctant to do that, or not everybody, but some people. I think there will be more appetite for that now. But I guess the key thing is, if we are locked down for, let's say, 3 months max, I'm crossing my fingers on that, who knows, that's not long enough to embed behaviour. All that is long enough to do is to give people a taste of what things can be like, which I think discerning people will crack on and try and make use of.
Well, I remember 20 years ago, at the time of the foot and mouth crisis, having video conferences, and ISDN line, of course, so it never worked very well. But I had a video conference with people in Flintshire County Hall. I think I mentioned this before, and they had a camera, which they were very proud of. It was voice activated. It would swivel to look at the person who was speaking. But when we used it, all it did every time somebody spoke was stare out the window of the car park. So it would swivel away from people. So I had a fantastic view. I had a conversation with the Flintshire car park basically for half an hour, and things have thankfully changed a lot since then. But you're right, Katy. Who knows in terms of behaviour? Nick, if I could bring you in there, I can see you indicating there just to have the final word.
It was just
we can go on for a long time, and we are running short of time now. But please,
just very quick. I think that to Katy's point about embedding the behaviour, I think that sometimes when you come across a new technology or way of doing things, it can be adopted reasonably quickly and it becomes part of our culture. The fact now that myself and my family are using things like Zoom or House Party to have weekly calls with each other, I don't think that'll stop. I think it's a new way of communicating with family and friends that we will see happening more in business as well. I think that those initial relationship building moments typically need to be in person.
Well, there's a virtual pub that opens at Happerstate on a Saturday night, which basically is open to all my mates I was in college with, and we meet up now and in this virtual pub. When I was in Australia, he's not particularly keen to be woken up at 4 a.m. to join us, but there we are. He wants to be part of our group. That's the way it's going to be. And we know that there are challenges ahead. Coronavirus is going to be with us next week, and of course over the next few weeks to come. It's been a fascinating conversation with the two of you. We could go on for a long, long time, but we've run out of time now. So, Katy Chamberlain, Katy, thanks very much indeed for joining me today.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
And Nick Pearce, thanks very much indeed for your time today, and hopefully we'll have you on at some point in the future.
Thanks, Karen, and lovely to meet you, Katy.
Nice to meet you too, Nick.
Well, you've been listening to the Business News Wales weekly business review with me, Carwyn Jones. Coronavirus is with us and will be with us for a long time yet, I suspect. But hopefully we'll meet again next week and we will talk to others in the world of business in Wales who will give their view on the way the business is dealing with possibly the most difficult and challenging situation since before the start of the Second World War. And so from me, Carwyn Jones, keep safe, and I hope to join you next week with more guests on the Weekly Business Review.